And welcome back to Movie Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How you doing?
Very well, Brian. Very well. It's been a delightfully, again, fog. Sorry, it seems to be the California theme. Foggy morning, but we got a good amount of work done. Got a little bunch of projects this afternoon. So I was kind of looking forward to today. How about you?
Oh, we are bracing for a massive storm on the East Coast. When we're recording this, it's still January. This is not going to drop for probably another 2 or 3 weeks or 2 weeks. We're bracing for this massive storm. But if anybody knows Washington, D.C., we might get this massive storm might drop an inch or 4 feet. We don't know. We have no idea until it hits. So we're preparing. We're sort of like, all right, well, we'll be ready for something. So who knows next week what we're going to have? It's supposed to hit over the weekend. So at least it'll be over the weekend. But I'm already hearing from clients telling me, oh, I don't know what's going to be like on Monday. I said, let's wait until Monday. Then you let me know.
Exactly. Exactly. Let's see what actually happens.
Exactly. Exactly. We have an interesting topic today. We're going to piggyback on what we talked about last week with Matt. I found that a fascinating discussion on coaching kids and thought it'd be a good opportunity for you and I to talk about further what our experiences have been, because I've got quite a bit of working with kids, not only from coaching standpoint, but also in the gym, rehabilitation, all that kind of stuff. So I thought that would be an interesting place to go to next. But before we do that, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it every time you do. Give us a thumbs up, give us a check mark, whatever it is for the platform of your choice. We really appreciate it. Comment, that really helps us as well. Even if the comment is just claps or whatever, we love to see that. It really helps us out. So do that. Instagram, you can reach us there at Moving Combos, or email movingcombos@gmail.com. So let's talk about kids and working with youngsters in general. I'm not sure how much experience you've had with them, but I've had varied experience.
So let me start with kind of full disclosure of my experience with this. Just so we're level setting. Clearly, Matt from last week has had a lot more experience
Oh yeah.
directly coaching kids and working with them at all different levels. As a Pilates teacher and a Pilates teacher working in primarily a rehab environment, I worked a lot with young dancers, ice skaters, and gymnasts. Those are
Mm,
primarily the group that I worked with, which is a subset of youth sports, if you will, for sure,
hmm
but has slightly different needs, slightly different things you're working on, slightly different ways of dealing with them. So that's really my whole experience. I think I worked with one young football player whose lats were so tight his back was killing him. So we worked on that. But that's all I've got in terms of more male oriented or more typical youth sports.
I've had a lot. In general, though, most of the time it's the kids of clients. And I think
Mhm.
we've all had that, where they're home for summer break or they're out of school this summer and they need to do this or they need to do that. The last one, believe it or not, had a client whose son was going to go into one of the military
Mhm.
colleges and was going to be joining up as well and going into boot camp and all this kind of stuff. So it was preparing for that. And he's got a lot of issues with his body. So it was preparing him to do that sort of thing. Unfortunately, he wasn't in the area. So I was just trying to point him in the right area, the right direction in the area he was in. And actually, I ended up telling him all more about Pilates and saying, look, this is really, I think, what your body needs, because you're going to be getting the gross motor movement in all of your military training. What you're probably not going to be getting is the specific stability stuff where your body really needs this. So,
Mhm.
but that's a lot of times what I get is, oh, my son, my daughter, we have this, they're into this sport, whatever. So it's a lot of times short term, getting them prepared for
Yeah.
whatever they
Yeah.
need to do.
So can I just jump in there for a moment on the parent
Absolutely.
and child scenario? Okay.
hmm
So again, I worked a lot with young dancers, gymnasts, athletes, and primarily they would come with their mom, right? With usually with their mom, with a parent, and oftentimes the parent would sit in the waiting room, and we didn't really have a waiting room. It was always just they're just kind of right at the beginning of the studio, and then the studio was there so they could see everything that was going on. And I have to say, one of the challenges for me in working with that population, 'Cause a lot of these were pretty high level kids. I mean, they were,
Mhm.
aiming for competitive athletes and our competitive sports and things. Um, the parents, oftentimes I had to tell the parents to leave.
Yeah.
So I'd be in the middle of a session and we'd be doing something, and either the parent wasn't happy with what the kid was doing or something. And the parent would yell out from the side of the room, ba da 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 da, watch
Yeah.
your leg or turn out more or something. And it really got to this point where it was very challenging to work with like parent, me, child. And the child was
Mhm.
really, especially like my 11, 12, 13-year olds, was just kind of caught in this loop of not really knowing who to pay attention to. And fortunately, my studio was right next to this really wonderful little shopping mall. So I was saying, why don't you just go and find something to do for half an hour while we while I work with your child? So I just wanted to bring that up
Mhm.
because there is a really in a studio, or I'm sure in a gym setting like yours, because yours is pretty much a private gym, you're going to
Mhm.
have those parent interactions.
And that's something you'd have to navigate. There's no
Yeah,
question. I remember
yeah,
one came in and I had not worked with either the mother, daughter, nothing. It was a cold call, but because we're known in our area for rehabilitative, movement, uh, physical therapist sent a young woman who had some spinal fusions from severe scoliosis, and she was trying to get back to function. And let's just say the mother wanted it a lot more than the daughter did.
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
during the assessment, the daughter barely said a word. And I'm trying to
Hmm.
engage the daughter because this is the person that me or my staff is going to have to work with, not the mother.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
was a challenge trying to pull things out of her at that time. And the mother was hovering. And,
yep,
we go through the medical history. So we're seated at the beginning, and the mother's the only one talking. Here's the goals.
yep,
Here's this. Here's that. Here's this.
yep,
And it's one of
yep,
these high functioning families,
yep.
high, a lot of demand on the kids and all of that. So when I took her out on the floor, I actually said, why don't you have a seat in our waiting room? And it made her uncomfortable. She actually pulled the chair around the corner so she could sit, but still keep an eye on what we were doing. And now, this is a person, male, working with
Correct.
their daughter. So I understood that aspect of it. Don't get me wrong. I
Right,
was
right,
very
right.
aware that there was a safety issue. So, but there was people on the floor. It wasn't anything like that, and we're very safe in general. Just very conscious of that. And she was 14, 15 years of age, and I have a
Okay. Yeah.
14-year-old about to be 15 next week. So I'm very, mindful of the age and everything, and working with her, it was just very interesting sort of feeling the eyes upon us.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will say this though, after a couple sessions, she came on her own. Mom was nowhere to be seen. I think I've spoken to the mom once in the last couple years,
Mm.
and she's learned that she can trust us. But it
Yeah.
really
That's a good
was,
one.
yeah, it took that part of it. Now, because this is someone who needs long-term work, it wasn't gonna be a 3 session and done deal. But it's a challenge sometimes with the parents. Now, I've had this with spouses too, so don't get me wrong, sometimes we get that as well.
Yes. Absolutely.
Both male and female, it goes both ways.
Goes
But
always.
with a parent, there is something. I was having a talk with my son last night. We were talking about Instagram. He wants Instagram. He's 18 years old. We have fought to keep them off of social media just because of all the research that's been done. And they've been fine with it. But he's like, my friends are on it. I'd like to follow them. Do you mind if I download it? And I got to tell you, it was a tough choice. So he and I had that conversation. And as a parent, you want to keep them safe and you feel responsible for everything. So I can see that if someone's working with my child, I kind of want to make sure that they're doing the right things and everything.
Yeah.
And that trust is hard to come by
Yeah.
until you cross that barrier and finally can trust.
Yeah. Absolutely. So thinking about that, one other thing that I think about with kids, and it depends on ages. So I want to talk a little bit about the different ages and how I work with kids differently depending how old they are. For in my practice, really about the youngest students that I worked with were probably 11 or 12, 10, 11, 12 were kind of the youngest.
Mhm.
And some of that was simply because the average reformer, not some of the ones with the moving foot bar, but the average reformer really, you can't be too much shorter than that, or you really just don't
Yeah.
fit. The equipment isn't really designed for somebody who's, let's say, 4 feet tall or a little bit taller than 4 feet. Um, it's got to be a little bit bigger than that. So that was some of it. The other thing too was attention span. And certainly for
Mhm.
me, working with a lot of the kids I was working with, these were pretty serious. Again, these were serious kids, but about a half hour was really good. Like that's what they could focus on. After the half hour, things would just start to fall apart. They'd either start to chat a lot or they were done, right? Just mentally and
Mhm.
physically done. So I really would just schedule like half an hour for those kids. And I'd come in, we do a very focused half hour, and then they'd go. And that was really a helpful tip for me when I first started working with that age group.
That's a great idea, and we have everybody scheduled on the hour no matter what, although we tell them, "We may only go for 40 minutes. We go as long as your
Mm,
body's going to keep up or your attention span."
right.
And something that I think that's a great idea is to really know the child, get to know them, but limiting it to half an hour and making it a focused half hour is not a bad idea. It really isn't.
I also always had some fun, like, especially for my gymnast and my
Yeah.
dancer kids. I would always make sure, like, there's some crazy stuff you could do on the trap table. And with my gymnast kids, I would do things like catwalk over, which sounds a little nuts. If you've ever seen this exercise, you're inverted, your legs are, just a whole gymnastic move. And with my dancers, I might do a little bit of jumping at the end, just something to make it fun, so that
Yep.
it wasn't all just serious work. Like and we'd laugh about things, and I'd use silly images and just things to keep them involved and keep them engaged at those ages, because those ages,
Mhm.
they're getting serious, but they're not that serious. And they often have a lot of pressure outside the circumstance. And I kind of wanted to make it, this is a thing you want to do, not something you have to do.
Absolutely. You have to make it fun. I think with last episode with Matt, I told him that with my kids, I would take them to the park and I would bring out a ton of toys. And when I say toys, they're like medicine balls and sand bells and vipers and whatever I've got that I can fit in the back of my truck, and just let's dump it on the ground and let's create a game. Let's create something. Now, they were very young, so a 15 or 20-pound medicine ball, I mean, it's kind of like World's Strongest Man with the Atlas Stone. It was heavy-ish for them. They were having to really negotiate it, but it was big. They had to negotiate it. I'd have them run with it and throw it as far as they can and do all these things that were fun and playful. If you're not having fun, then it becomes a chore. And I think that's the one thing that we forget as adults is we get very hooked on repetitions. We need to
Mhm.
do 12
Right.
repetitions of this, 20
Right.
repetitions, 5 reps,
Getting our
whatever it is,
workout
whatever your
done.
goal is. Yeah.
Yeah.
With kids, sometimes it's just about doing it once, twice, 3 times. That's all they need, and
Right.
then move on.
Right. Yeah.
And what I like to do is string some exercises together. I learned this a long time ago, functional cardio, where you can do like 10 exercises back to back to back to back to back and do like 10 seconds of each. And then it became known as like HIIT training and things like that. But this was way before that. We just called it functional cardio because you did that and you did 30 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever it is, of 10 or 15 activities. And then you rested a little bit and you did it again. And then you did it again. And it became almost like an obstacle course. But the
Yeah.
kids, you're varying their attention span. You're changing things all the
Yeah.
time.
Exactly. Nice.
It's kind of like changing the channel in their brain. It's like boom, 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 boom. And it really does help. And it keeps the spontaneity and the fun.
Yeah, and I mean, from a Pilates perspective, the Pilates environment was kind of great for that. It's like, okay, let's come over here, let's do this. Okay, let's come over here, let's do that. Okay, let's come over here. So there was always like you could bounce around from one thing to the other, throw a Bosu in
Hmm.
the middle of it and have them, balance on that, or do a little bit of, one leg balance on it, or a little bouncing work. And that was just awesome. And then they get through it all and they don't realize how much work they've done, right? But
Hmm.
they've had a good time and they're willing to come back, which is another critical thing with kids.
That's huge. If they're enjoying it, they will want to come back. It can become their time. Uh, like I say, I've worked with a number of kids, And oftentimes, I don't know if you've heard this before, but a lot of people have said things like kindergarten teachers, they're nothing but glorified babysitters and things like that, without realizing the importance of the teaching that these teachers are doing at a young age, the formative age. It's
Right.
incredibly
Right.
important,
Yep.
incredibly important. Well, I served kind of that role for a couple of kids where it was like, look, they're just not exercising. I just need them to work out. Will you do that with them? And look, I specialize in doing rehabilitation, but shoot, I can kick someone's butt. That's easy. I can work them out, and let them have fun. I literally became big brother to a
Yeah.
number of kids
Mhm.
because
Yep.
I was playing with them. I could listen to them. At that age, I didn't have as much gray in my hair. I didn't have as many wrinkles around my eyes. I was a little younger, but I was an older, kind of like a young uncle sort of thing that they could introduce me to their music. We could listen to fun stuff. We could play. And some days I'd say, get in the truck. We're going to go rock climbing today. What? It's like, why not? You're my last client. Let's go. Let's go have some fun. Let's go do something different. And
Awesome.
that was something that would challenge them because these kids often had social anxieties or they weren't well liked in school or whatnot. So I could help push their boundaries a little bit in a safe way. One kid that I worked with for a number of years was kind of like I was in school. Wasn't as big as I was, but he was overweight, very out of shape, glasses, the nerd. Had no friends, and they're incredibly, incredibly wealthy. And the mom said, I want you to work with my son. And I said, okay, we'll work with him. His name's Josh. I'll work with Josh, no problem. And we started having fun. We started playing. And now I started working with him when he's 10, 11. Well, his body
Mhm.
starts maturing. And as it's maturing, he's getting some muscle and he's getting confidence and he's doing things. He started getting into music. He was an amazing musician. Uh, he made like first chair in the state jazz, band when he
Wow.
was, in high school. I mean, that kind of level. But what the exercises did was made him more confident in himself and what
Yeah.
he could accomplish because I could say, okay, we're going to do the leg press, whatever it was, but I could put a challenging weight on there and make it seem like it's more impressive than it was, but give him that confidence. And you could see him walk out of there standing a little taller, being a little bit more confident about who he was in his own skin. And then in high school, he actually became quite popular. And really, it transformed him. And that relationship was great. And was in contact with him until he was in his into college. And what was interesting is I heard that there's some people out there, I'm not going to mention any names, that do like motivational speaking. And they're
Mhm.
very, very, very popular type of people. Well, he became I hate the word disciple, but follower of one of these people and was talking on stage, brought me up as one of his,
Huh.
influences because it was at that influential age where
Yeah,
he
absolutely.
didn't have anyone he could respond to and have that relationship with that wasn't family, wasn't forced on him, but it was like, hey, we're just hanging out, we're having fun, we're enjoying ourselves. So making it fun, challenging, but also giving him confidence that every week he did a little bit more, he did a little bit more, so he felt good about himself and felt more confidence. That was important.
That is such a great story, Brian. I love that story. I love that story for so many reasons. It just that is what exercise can do for kids. Doesn't always, but
Mhm.
can do for kids. Is
Yep.
when you get more confident in your body, you get more confident. Like that's just kind of how it is. And when you have
Mhm.
success, you create more success, especially at those ages. One of the this was a long time ago. The Pilates Method Alliance had a program called Pilates for Kids, and they were really trying to get Pilates like into the schools and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And one of the teachers that I worked with, Don Marie Ikes, did kind of a little pilot study in I think it was a third grade classroom. So it was basically 8, 9-year-olds, that kind of age. And they basically did I think it was an 8-week little pilot study where they did one Pilates class a week for 8 weeks with this group of kids. And it was really like, so, and they did the pre-test for them was a little bit about mobility and physical ability, but it was more about how they felt about themselves. I'm confident doing this. I'm not confident, da, da, da. So there's a lot of like
Mhm.
emotional qualities. And after just 8 weeks of once a week, and Dawn Marie's fairly entertaining. So I think she really, and I've seen some pictures of the classes, they had a good time. They did a post test. And in the post test, all the kids were like, I feel more confident. I feel less fearful. I have less anxiety. And they probably wouldn't use that terminology at the age of 8 or 9.
Mhm.
And I feel like I can do a whole lot more. Teachers noticed their schoolwork was better. Like so many things improved just
Mhm.
from having that pretty minimal physical accomplishment, right? And
Mhm.
that's really what
Absolutely.
I love, right? And that's what really does bring kids that feeling of, I've got this.
Mhm. Well, I'm gonna bring up something here, and I don't know how you were, but when I was in grade school, I was the person who was worst at I was good at baseball, but honestly, I was sort of I was the heavy kid. I was the big kid. I weighed more than 100 pounds more than everybody else in my grade, sometimes a lot more than that. And so I was the one teased. I did not do well in sports. So I had no confidence. I was not going to be feeling good about myself in an athletic endeavor.
Mm,
And the heavier I got, the bigger I got, the worse that got. And anything that I could do that would make me feel more positive about myself in a physical sense is huge. And I'm not sure how
mhm,
that is. I can only speak from a male standpoint, but from a guy standpoint, there's a lot about their physicality that is inbred into confidence, which is why a lot of the most confident people in high school are the jocks. They're the ones who do feel comfortable about themselves and feel comfortable, in their own skin and whatnot. Whereas I was not that kid whatsoever.
mm,
And that's something that I make sure when I work with some of my younger people. Yes, some of them are higher level athletes and they have very specific goals. Cool. We work on that. But when I can work with someone who wasn't that kid, who needs more of the confidence aspect, needs more of, here's what you can do. Check this out. Look, you can do this. You couldn't do this before. That goes a long way in their own self esteem. Like, wow, with my youngest son, he had a huge transformation
mm.
and it happened over the course of a year. And he went from being overweight, somewhat out of shape and whatnot. Now he's unbelievably lean. His body looks like that of a model. I mean, he grew 4 or 5 inches. I mean, it was just sort of almost a transformation that you're like, uh, do we need to talk about eating disorder? Do we need to talk about, because you
What's
thinned
happening?
out and you are ripped and I did not expect this from you, but he's watching what he eats and he's taking care of himself. And, but when we go to the gym, he would work. I showed him what to do and things. And my oldest son wants to work out with me and I was working out with both of them. But my youngest son, he started doing things on his own, but he bragged to me. Yeah, I was doing this. I was doing that. And I was doing this much weight. And I could see the pride. I could see how good he felt. And when I would watch them, I would make sure I wasn't just being, the guy, put your weight here, all of that. But it's like, wow, that was awesome. That was amazing. I love how you did this. So a lot of positiveness. Uh, one of my ex-girlfriends said, praise with faint damnation is how she always approached, correcting people. Praise something, but then correct something, what you really are trying not to do is just, that was horrible. You want to,
Right.
give them
Right, that was
whatever is
great.
good.
Here's something you could do better, right?
Yeah,
Like, just
let's
yeah,
focus on this next time.
yeah.
And so I work with that with my boys and with all the kids I work with is it's like, let's boost them up first. Make them feel good about what they just did. wow, that's more weight than you've ever done. That's amazing. Or you did more reps. Or how did that feel? Your form was awesome. Let's just, next time around, let's just try this. See if it feels better. It may feel even better. So they don't feel like it's just a small little thing. And they're like, oh. And when they can feel that and get that, and yes, coming from a father, it means one thing, but also coming from a coach, coming from anybody
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
has that influence on you is huge. And that's a huge
Yeah.
part of this, is making sure you
Yeah.
do praise. It's not just about correction.
Make it successful.
Yeah.
No, and I also say that a lot of times my role, and your role too, I imagine, is we're not the coach. I'm not the choreographer. I'm
Yeah.
not their dance teacher. You're not
Yes.
their coach necessarily. So we have this interesting ancillary role. We're not the
Mhm.
authority figure, right? We're not like
Right.
the one who's telling them you're doing this wrong, you're doing this right. We're going to put you on first base. We're not going to give you, you're going to be in the dugout. We're not doing that. That's not our role.
Mhm.
And in a
Yep.
lot of ways, that's really great because our role is really just to support them and to
Mhm.
make them successful, right? We don't, yeah, we can certainly refine technique and all those things as we go along, but really our primary role is just support, right? And
Mhm.
giving them that positive feedback.
Yep.
And I want to add
Absolutely.
here, yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to add a little bit here. One of the things too that I loved about working with kids is the changes they can make are like, wow, that was fast. you know,
Unbelievably.
we're talking about your son, like boom, suddenly it's a different body.
It's unbelievable. I was working with Zach, my youngest, on deadlifting with a trap bar, the one you stand inside of. It's sort of hexagon shaped.
Yeah.
And he went from just barely being able to do the bar to doing pretty much his body weight in record time. We're talking, 6 weeks, 6
Ooh.
or 8 weeks. And I'm like, I'm floored. You're getting close to, I'm like, you're going to get hit my weight before and this is when he's young. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was phenomenal how quickly
Oh.
they make that jump. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with motor skills
Yeah.
as well as the strength. Yes, they're going to
Yeah.
get stronger,
Absolutely.
but whenever I hire people, a lot of times I'll tell, my staff, I'd rather pick it from the tree than, pick it up off the ground. I'd rather go and find someone who doesn't have bad habits that need to be broken. Well, if I have someone who's been working out by themselves in the gym and doing everything all wrong, guess what? My first so many sessions are re-educating their body and getting them
Exactly.
to
Just
do it
correcting.
right.
Yeah.
But if you have someone who's never done it ever, and you get them into proper form, proper technique, and really sort of get that groove going, that neurologic groove, I call it, where they're just doing the exercise perfectly right off the bat, their weights go up relatively quickly and they get stronger
Absolutely.
very quickly. And
Right.
that's amazing to
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah. Yeah, I had one kid who I will never forget who was he wanted to play basketball and he was not very tall. So and he was young enough that he might have gained a lot of height later. I'm not sure. I was probably working with him when he was 13 or 14. So he wasn't he
Okay.
would and he was still pretty short. And he loved basketball and he was in a summer basketball camp or was about to go to summer basketball camp. And I brought him in, and basically it was like, I want to be able to jump because I can't jump very well. And if you're a basketball player, you got to be able to jump. Like that's the deal.
Mhm.
And the wonderful thing about the Pilates environment was the reformer put the jump board on, and you can mess with whatever you want to mess with. And this was a kid who had been doing basketball for 3 or 4 years at that point. So since he was, 10, 11, and he always wore high top, stiff basketball shoes. And he'd never learned to use it was really kind of simple with him. He'd never learned to use his feet at all. So he was
Mm.
jumping entirely from his hips and his knees and his butt, basically. So he would kind of push off the floor and then land. And
Mm.
I just know from being a dancer, doing a lot of dance training, that when you add even a little bit of your ankle action and then your foot action on that, your jump improves tremendously. So
Yeah.
in his case, I only worked with him for about 6 weeks, twice a week, I think for 6 weeks, and we did jump training. And the first thing we
Mhm.
did was do it without his shoes on. And his feet were just dead as a doornail. They weren't doing anything. So we just got his feet going. And we did a little what I call straight leg jumps with very little resistance. So you're basically just using your feet. We did that. And then we did some 2-leg jumps. We did some 1-leg jumps. We did all that barefoot. Then we did it in his shoes. His jump changed from minimal to respectable in those 6
Mhm.
weeks. And I'm sure it just went on from there. And it was just because he wasn't using his feet because he didn't, nobody
Right.
told him that. If you're working in high top basketball shoes, you've never learned to use your feet because nobody's told you to do that. And you can't really use them
Mhm.
very well in the shoes anyway. So it was a simple thing, but it was so nice to see such a big transformation so quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Something that you and I talked about a little bit before we got started, and think this is a good
Mhm.
opportunity to talk about now because am
Yeah.
mentioning, doing some pretty serious weight training with my kids when they were not that old. Okay, we're not talking about 4 or 5 years old, but they were 10, 11, 12 when we started doing some things in the gym when we first began. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard, don't don't do weight training. Don't do weight training when they're growing. Never do weight training when they're growing. Oh my gosh, that's going to stunt their growth. It's going to stunt their growth. I can't tell you what a fallacy this is.
And I
It
love that you
blows
mentioned
my
this because
mind.
that's also been something that's floating through my mind. And again, I don't do weight training, so it's not something that I've paid a lot of attention to. But clearly, it's out there in the ether that this is like something you don't do.
When I was in college, my professor brought it up and said, "How many of you have heard this?" And every kid's hand went up. Everybody's
Yeah.
hand went up. And this was an athletic training, our department was both athletic trainers as well as, kinesiology majors. So it was a combination of things. So a lot of these people are going to become coaches. And he said, how many of you have ever read the study that proved that? And then he made us read it. It is one of the worst written studies I have ever seen in my life. The controls were horrific. Horrific. It was one of those, oh my gosh. But it got picked up somewhere. Kind of like now we
Mhm.
talk about clickbait. Well, guess what? Someone published in one of the, according to this professor, in one of the major publications of the day, published an article based on this study. And guess what? It spread like wildfire. And suddenly everybody's telling me, oh, no, my kids can't lift weights. No, they're still growing. I don't want to stunt their growth. Thinking, oh, please, you've got to be kidding me.
It's
But
and
it's a fallacy.
yeah, and so like one of the funny things about that is it is funny what disinformation spreads and what doesn't.
Uh-huh.
I just find that sort of odd. But in this circumstance, like you and I were talking about this again before we went on, when you think about the pre formal fitness physical education days, okay?
Mhm.
Let's say
Yep.
you were born on a farm or you were born in a gardening family or a farming family or whatever.
Yep.
What are you doing? You're lifting stuff, you're moving stuff, you're dealing with animals if you're dealing with animals. You're being physically active. You're lifting things.
Mhm.
Right, and I think about I love American Ninja Warrior. It's one of my, little things in life, which probably is I'm not sure it's happening anymore, but anyway, I always enjoyed it. And they always talked about farm strong. Like some of the
Mhm.
people on there that did the best were kids who never did physical education, didn't do weightlifting necessarily or any kind of formal physical stuff, but basically just lived a life of moving hay
Mhm.
bales and moving cattle and lifting stuff up around the farm. And it was interesting because it's like whenever I hear a study like that, and this is just, critical reasoning, if you will, or critical thinking. If you look at a study like that, you think, okay, does this make any sense in terms of actual
Mhm.
life and how we actually live our life? I mean, how many kids are lifting a 15-pound backpack every day from the time they're like
Every
6,
day.
and wearing it on their back? So this just doesn't make any sense. And it's always useful to look at those things and say, okay, what about regular life would this make sense in or not make sense in?
My dad grew up on a farm. My family came from farmers upstate New York. He claims 6 feet. I'm gonna say he's not, I don't think he ever reached that, but okay, he claims 6 feet. His brother, 6'7".
Oof.
Okay. These people worked from the time that they could walk in the fields, lifting, carrying, digging posts, fence post holes,
Yeah.
constant work. My dad has forearms that when he was younger were probably 17 to 18 inches around. They were
Holy moly.
gigantic.
Yeah.
His hands are like catcher's mitts. They're so thick, his fingers, they're just like, they're huge. But it's because he grew up working on the farm until he was 18, until he went into the military. That's just what you did. And my grandfather was considered one of the strongest men in the county, and he
Mhm.
was a lot shorter than my dad was. He was like 5'6", but he was considered one of
Mm.
the strongest men in the county. Farm strong, working their
Yeah.
bodies nonstop all the time. And again,
Yeah.
it wasn't one of these things where it's like, oh, well, I guess that's too heavy. I guess that's going to stay there forever. No,
It's like,
it's like,
no,
we
you
got to
gotta
move
do it.
that.
Gotta figure out how
You
to
got
do
to
that.
figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you gained strength. I mean, you think about how overload principle works.
Yeah.
You you overload a muscle, guess what? You rest, you recover, it gets a little stronger. You do it again and again and again and again, and it keeps getting stronger. My dad was never going to be a bodybuilder. He didn't have that body, but he had arms. He could crush anything in his hands, man, because he was working the field.
Yeah. And you think about, like, so much of what we're trying to do, honestly, in the fitness industry is make up for the deficit of physical
Exactly.
activity that a lot of people are not doing, kids and adults, right? We sit in front of a computer 10 to 12 to 15 hours a day, depending on what your particular job is, and then you drive there, and
Hmm.
then, you sit and you watch television at night, or you play
Yep.
video games or whatever. And so much of what we're really trying to do is just bring in a more formal way, some movement into a
Hmm.
system that really is designed to kind of move all the time.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the fallacies with weight training and weightlifting in general is it's become very specified.
Yeah.
I think every discipline becomes very specified in what they do. And again, weightlifting got kiboshed by bodybuilders. So it became
Mhm.
incredibly specified, where here are these exercises for these specific body parts and
Right,
these
muscle
specific
groups to make them
muscles.
look like this. Yeah.
Right. And again, that's a total goal. Uh, That's fine. That's not everybody's goal though.
Right.
So you have to keep in mind that a lot of times for people, especially when I'm working with young people, it's about getting them to move. It's about getting them to move properly and working with them in things that are going to get them to work, make their body stronger in general, to be able to move better through space. And like you said, to fill in the gaps that are missing from doing things like manual labor, working in the yard. I mean, there's a lot of kids who have never pushed a lawnmower, who don't even
Mhm.
know how to do things like that. And it's just their parents never asked them to, so they don't know how to do that, you know? And that's something that exercise is here for. So if someone comes to me, it's like, okay, what do I need to do to get them to be stronger and better and more active and healthier in general? And a lot of it's not going to involve bicep curls. They're going to involve whole body movements.
Right. Balance work, coordination work,
Absolutely.
neuromotor work or whatever they call it, right? Different things that teach the body how to move. Because especially at
Hmm.
that point, I mean, I don't know about you, but I distinctly remember, I think I was in between 6th grade and 7th grade, I grew 5 inches.
Woo.
And yeah, yeah, I went from like 5'2" to 5'7", I think, in one short period of time. Um, and and basically, like, you don't know where your body is. Like, you
Hmm.
have no like, your body is suddenly working really differently today than it did 2 weeks ago. And I remember that summer was pretty awkward. Like, I was swimming, I was running, I was biking, I was doing a bunch of things, and they all just felt weird every day because I
Hmm.
didn't know my bones were going faster than my muscles. Everything got tight. Then it would kind of adapt. And that's true for kids. Like everything is changing kind of a lot, kind of all the time. And continually checking in with their body, which is an easy thing to do in our professions, is just a way to kind of keep them building and growing as their body is going through those changes and
Mhm.
adapting to those changes. One of the big challenges working particularly with dancers and ice skaters and gymnasts is very often there's a period of time when they are going through a growth spurt, when the bones are growing faster than the muscles and they get really stiff for a period of time.
Mhm.
And if you're a dancer, gymnast, or an ice skater, all of those require a lot of flexibility. Your leg going X high, your back extending X amount, however that goes. And one of the challenges always with them is like when they're going through a growth spurt, suddenly their skill level goes way down and they
Yeah.
can't do anything they used to be able to do. And it doesn't last all that long, but for them, it feels like a lifetime because they're 12. You know, and so one of
Yep.
the things that we would often do is just let people know that, and let their parents know that. And for that was just education. It's like, oh, how, and if somebody came in and said, yeah, she's really tight, she can't do this anymore, blah, blah, blah. I'd say, how much has she grown in the last 6 months? And they'd say, oh, 3 inches. I'd say, that's why. And we would just
Mhm.
educate them and say, okay, well, she'll be better, but just give her some time to grow into herself. And in the meantime, keep stretching, keep moving, keep doing what you're doing, but know that it will take a while for that to all catch up.
That's a great point. I remember hearing a story, a famous basketball player who grew like a foot in a summer
Oh, God.
and could barely walk. He couldn't
Absolutely.
figure out how, I mean, his whole body changed.
Right. Yeah,
And he
exactly.
eventually ended up being professional, amazing basketball player, but his body, and he was not someone who came from a lot of money, so it wasn't like he was doing a lot of training and things. He played basketball. That's what he did. And
Right.
suddenly he can't play anymore. He can't run down the court. He can't move his body the way it used to move.
Yep.
And now that's an extreme, but how you grew 5 inches. There's a lot of people out there who do grow a significant amount in a short period of time. And they feel gangly. They kind of look, we got a puppy recently, and we all know that sort of stage where they go from little bitty puppy to suddenly being tall puppy, but they're still puppy. But like their legs
Right.
grew like a foot, and you're like, that's a big puppy. But they still act like they're, a puppy. It's the same thing with a lot of these young teenagers at 12, 13, 14 years of age, where they do have a growth spurt and their mind still thinks that they're smaller. Their body still wants to think that they're moving like they used to, but they're not. They're a lot bigger and they're growing and things are tighter. They need some re-education.
Yeah.
So their bodies you need to have some patience with that. The other group that I've worked with that I just want to make mention of are the ones who are not athletes, are the
Mhm.
ones who are not coordinated. I had one teenager that I was working with, and we're still friends to this day. And he's in his 30s now. And I worked with him when he was like 12, 13. And we worked together for a long time, years and years. And he was relatively tall, lanky. But when he moved, he didn't have grace. He didn't have coordination.
Mm.
Today, he would squat perfectly. Tomorrow, he couldn't figure out how to squat. It
Mm.
was sort of that
Yes.
there wasn't that memory of movement, which was very
Yeah.
interesting because I'd never seen that before. But for him, we all sort of joke about body dyslexia, but for him, there was almost like a body amnesia. It didn't
Yeah.
remember or store those skills, or
Those motor control patterns didn't get stuck,
they didn't get
right?
stuck.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
what was interesting though, and I'm going to say this for anybody who has someone like this, you got to dive deeper than you ever think you should.
Mm.
For him, we found out it was his eyes.
Oh.
His eyes tracked different timing. I always wondered because he couldn't
Oh,
catch a
that's
ball, literally.
interesting.
You'd throw something at him, and to him, it was here in his face. It was already there, even though it's 6 feet away.
Huh.
He had no tracking ability with his eyes were not bifocal for that. They were
Right,
focusing
right.
very
Wow.
different.
Wow. That's wild.
So walking up and down stairs was challenging.
Right.
because he couldn't see depth. His depth
Right. Because
perception
where
was
is that
all
step?
off.
Uh,
So could you imagine not being able to focus on a horizon, not being able to see things where they really are in space? So for
mhm.
him, that was a huge revelation, and he didn't get diagnosed until much, much later. I think maybe late teens, early, 20s. But then everything seemed to make sense. And as soon as I heard it, it was, oh my gosh, yes. But I'm not a vision specialist. That's not my thing. I just figured, okay, some kids
Right.
just
How
aren't
would you
coordinated.
know?
Okay.
Yeah.
How
I
would
don't
you
know.
know? But I
Yeah.
can juggle. So I thought, oh, maybe he couldn't toss a ball. I mean, it was one of these things like,
No.
wow, he really can't do anything. But because of that, it made him fearful of a lot of things. So he
I
had
bet.
things like social anxiety. He had,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, for him, he was scared of everything. And it was very freeing to figure out, oh, we just need to have you correct this visually. And things started to make sense for him.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things that, again, not my specialty, but something that when we realized, it made me realize working with other people, dig deeper, dig deeper. If there's something that doesn't look quite right, maybe there's something more than just the physical, which is my specialty. Maybe there's something more to it. I
Yeah.
can only do so much. We can only do so much because we're handling movement, some neurologic, skill set and
Or
motor training.
physiologic or something, right? There's all
But
kinds of there's things that we don't really address directly. Yeah. Our
exactly,
world for sure.
exactly. So that's just
Huh.
a reminder out there that if you've come across something like that, take a look, go a little deeper, or ask
Yeah.
the right questions to the parents. Have they been tested for this? Have they been, just in case, because you never know.
Right. And I mean, I think about one person I know where they only had one kid. So, and their child was quite unusual in a number of ways, but they didn't really know any different,
Yeah.
right? Like they knew they weren't quite like other kids, but they didn't quite have the they didn't quite have the ability to
No
connect that.
comparison.
And right. And I
Yeah.
and I grew up in a big family and I've had a ton of kids in my life. And I said, no, there's something odd here. Like this isn't just your unique child, like every child is unique. This is something odd here. And sometimes we can see that easier than they can, because we're
Mhm.
looking for it, partly because we've had a lot more exposure, oftentimes to a much wider variety of people.
Yep.
One other little piece that I want to add, and this again is because I've primarily worked with this particular group. Two things. One is there is a lot of I suspect it's more true of women than men, but men have their own version of this. There's a lot of emotional support that's required at different periods,
Ah.
and there's a lot of sort of psychological issues
Mhm.
that sometimes pop up, so particularly for girls in these sports. And one of them is being aware of eating disorders and possible eating disorders. That was always something
Absolutely.
because I worked with a lot of dancers and a lot of gymnasts, a lot of ice skaters. We always had to kind of be aware: are they losing a lot of weight? Are they getting really weird about their food? What are you hearing? So we always had kind of a screening thing. Just all of us had a screen on, I should say. We don't really have an official screening where we would just pay attention to that
Mhm.
because it's really, really common in all those sports and it's often really destructive to be very calorie deficient at a time when you are trying to grow and work really hard at your activity is not a recipe for success.
Mhm.
And so we would always have to keep an eye on that. And the other thing, too, that was interesting in that particular group is oftentimes they would go through puberty and then their body was different and not always in a good way.
Yeah.
Right? So you'd start out with a lean dancer body and you would suddenly get breasts and boobs, or breasts and butt, right? You'd suddenly have like a
Yep.
shape, which was not necessarily going to make you successful in your activity. Or I think
Mhm.
about an ice skater I worked with who just structurally had possibly the tightest hip flexors I have ever seen. And being an ice skater, it's not going to help that necessarily. But we really worked hard on just getting some mobility there in order to achieve the forms of her sport. And we got somewhere, but in my experience, it was going to take a lot more to be able to, again, achieve the requirements of her activity.
Mhm.
Or, with dancers who had a particular ankle structure that made it really hard for them to really be on point. or to even have a pointed foot just because their ankle didn't
Mhm.
allow that. And so coming up across some of those structural limitations was always a really interesting and challenging thing. And some of it is, in that world was helping kids understand there's another way to do what you love to do, maybe not at the level you're hoping to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And that's oof, that's a tricky
That's
one.
a
That's
hard
something you had to do a
conversation.
lot. That's a hard
That's a hard
conversation, and it's also not one you wanna say you'll never get there because some of their teachers may say, "You'll never be a dancer." Like, "No, okay, let's see if we can," instead of being a high level professional ballerina, maybe you wanna be a jazz dancer, maybe you wanna be a contemporary dancer, maybe you wanna do dance competition, right? Maybe there's another
Mhm.
way for you to express yourself, that just allows your body to be less stressed and more successful.
It's identical for men.
Uh,
And I think even more so with some of the activities when we're talking about things like football, baseball,
mm,
basketball, lacrosse,
uh-huh.
you know, the sports of high school, grade
High
school,
school
high
sports, yeah,
school,
yeah,
etc. We talked about it a little bit with Matt, the specialization. The parents are, I'm, I trained one, I trained the mom, then trained the son. He was very high level lacrosse player, went on to college, play at the collegiate level. But he's maybe 5'8".
mm,
He's a little stocky. He's fast. He's a little stocky. He wanted to put on some muscle. But was he going to play for one of the top schools? Maybe not.
right,
I've worked with a number of kids. We all, I think, know if you've ever been to Little League, you can spot the one kid who's amazing from a mile
right,
away.
exactly.
We
Yeah, yes,
we had that kid in our Little League. He went and played pro ball. But you know
yeah,
what? We knew it. I mean, we're
yeah, it's
him.
clear, it's clear.
He was head and shoulders over everybody, the way he moved, the way
Yeah,
he was a pitcher, a catcher, the best batter. I mean, he was everything and
yeah,
just was so much better than everybody else. You can see that kid.
yeah,
And I remind, especially when it comes to professional sports, because, my dad always wants to tout, oh, I could have, if I hadn't broken my arm that year, I probably would. And I was like, look, I was good. I was not going to play pro ball. I might have made high school, maybe college, if I was extremely lucky at one of these small little bitty colleges, maybe. You're only going to get so high because it's a pyramid. If you think about it,
yes,
Little League is the widest point, but the
yes,
higher up you go,
yeah,
it
absolutely.
it weeds people out that don't have the
Yes,
necessary skill set. And I think
yeah,
everything's like that. Dance, gymnastics,
yeah, any
whatever it
physical
is.
activity. Yeah,
Absolutely. My wife and I
at
were
a certain
watching
point, you got the talent
NCAA
or you don't.
gymnastics. Yeah.
Yeah,
And we're watching this, and it was so funny because we've been watching the elites for so long, people like,
right, right.
Simone Biles and
Yeah, yeah,
whatnot.
yeah,
And then you
yeah,
see the college kids, and I had to retune my brain
yes,
because I was trying to compare these kids to our Olympic athletes. And I'd say, wait a minute. No, this is the next level down. They are still unbelievably amazing. They are phenomenal.
right.
But there's that one more percent. It's
Yes,
sort of like you get that
yes,
1%, and then the percentage underneath that is 10%, and the percentage of that is 25%. It is that pyramid. And I have to sometimes have a talk with parents and say, you know what? Little Johnny here, he's good. He might make he may play maybe college, maybe, but he's a little small. He may not have the genetics, especially when it comes to football. One of my clients is not that tall. Let's just say that, not that tall as a male. His kids are destined, his wife's not that tall. They're destined not to be the tallest people in the room. Okay. His son's a football player. And, fortunately, father understands he's probably not going to play. I said, look, there's going to come a point where he's going to
yeah, there'll come a
peak,
moment.
and he's going to peak height wise, and he's going to probably peak speed wise and power wise. And then all these other kids are going to be a lot bigger,
Mhm,
a lot stronger, and they're going to bypass him. I grew up with a lot of Samoans and Hawaiians. Okay.
Mhm.
They are some of the strongest people you've ever want to meet. I mean, they do not look that strong, but I've told this story to you before. Maxing out on my bench press, guy comes in walking off the street, puts 405 on the bar after I did 225, and I was barely able to do that. Puts 405 off the street wearing jeans and a t-shirt and does a close grip bench press for 20
Holy
repetitions.
moly. Okay. Go,
That's
dude.
his warm up. Because he said, if I was done, I said, yeah. And he put on 2 plates on each side. I said, he just walked in. What's he going to do with that? And then repped it out for 20 reps. And I went, yep, there's a difference.
There's the
Genetically
genetics.
speaking,
There's
I'm
the
never going to
training and the
be that.
genetics. Nope.
It's just not going to happen. So there
No.
is a limit, and we have to have these conversations with the parents and let them know, look, it's great for the kids to do this. I love that they're playing sports. I love that they're doing it. Let's keep some realistic goals sometimes. You don't have to shatter their dreams, but let's make sure that their goals are realistic to what they can accomplish. And hopefully they can exceed their genetics. That's the goal.
Right.
That's the goal. And hopefully they can. But at the same time, there are some things that maybe they won't be able to. I've told the story in many of my classes. You've probably heard me tell it, but as much as someone like Shaquille O'Neal wanted to be a jockey and, ride a horse, he was not going to be.
Not going to happen.
His genetics gave him a different ability.
Well,
So with that too.
I have to tell after one story, just because you talked about the kid that stands out. So both of my niece and nephew were both swimmers, divers, water people. And one of them, my niece, was swimming with Katie Ledecky back in your area. And I remember going to watch, they were doing a mile swim, which is as an observer is kind of dull because you just sit there and you just count laps. But it was clear, like it was so funny because it was so clear after like the first 4 laps. I think Katie'd already lapped everybody in the pool, literally, darn close. And she finished, I don't know how long it takes to swim a mile, I don't remember, but she finished a good several minutes before everybody else in the pool. She's gotten out, she's got her towel on, she's taken off her thing.
She showered, she's in the car.
She showered, and they're still just like, and then one other time we were at a diving meet, and I was actually watching the swimming in this part of the pool, and then the diving was kind of over on the far side of the pool. And people were diving, and suddenly it was like, what was that?
Yeah.
Because it was like plunk, 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 and then it was like, whoo, boom, boom. It was just perfection. And they said, oh yeah, he's training for the Olympics. He was in high school. I think he was a senior in high school, and he was definitely aiming for that. And it was just so clear. Like from across the giant room, you could see this one kid just caught your eye because they were so far above everybody else.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah.
Then I also think about a lot of my friends who are, athletes to this day who were never extraordinary, right? Like they were never extraordinary. They maybe did a little college competition, or they danced in some regional dance companies, but they just kept with it. And in many ways, I find those are the people that stick with it the longest and get the most pleasure out of it, or can, right? Because like, I just enjoy this. Like I'm doing it for fun. I'm doing it because I like it. And I'm going to keep doing it because it's fun. And, if I don't win the competition and I don't get this, that's fine. I'm just going to keep doing it. And I really think that's the attitude that we really want to foster as much as we can in the kids we work with.
100%. That's the proper attitude. You're doing it because you enjoy it.
Exactly.
You're having fun.
Yeah.
And they're less likely to burn out.
Yeah.
A lot of these kids who are pushed by the parents, it's not just their own love of this game, but they want to please their parents and they're pushed by their parents. They're the ones that are going to burn out eventually. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes.
Oftentimes.
And
or get rebellious or.
Oh, yeah. And run from it. Exactly. No matter how good they are. Whereas if someone finds joy in it and enjoys it, they can do it forever. I mean, your niece and nephew, they still love to swim.
Mm-hmm.
Still. And I know the family, they still love it. But they're never going to be on that super elite level. They made their way up. They were great, but they still enjoy it. And that's all that matters. And they're
Yeah.
going to probably continue doing it until forever, until, until their bodies can't any longer. And that's
Right.
really what we want to foster, is that healthy feeling of fun and enjoyment of whatever the sport is, even if the sport is just going to the gym and having fun there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that was a there was I think this was a lot of what in many ways very complimentary to what Matt did, because I think
Yeah.
for me this talks a lot about how to work with all those other aspects of working with kids, because there's so many pieces other than what exercise you're going to do with them, which, we didn't talk
Hmm.
about really at all, but it's how you manage that and how you create an atmosphere which really makes them successful and makes them want to work out for the rest of their life or do something with their body for the rest of their life. Because that's the benefit. That's really the ultimate value that we can provide.
Absolutely. 100%. And, we can break down. And I think that'd be a good thing for us to do in the future, is to take a look at certain sports, certain activities, and what we want to
Yeah.
focus on. But today, I think, was an opportunity just to talk about, okay, it's more of a mindset when you're working with youngsters,
Hmm.
because it's real easy to get caught up in, getting them better, faster now. And really, we want to keep them healthy, not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally too.
Absolutely.
So make them better human beings. That's part of our job.
Always part of our job.
Always part of our job. Well, thank you guys very much for listening. We really appreciate it. As always, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate that. If you want to get in touch with us, Gmail is the best way. Movingcombos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us. We answer all emails. You can also DM us on Instagram, Moving Combos on Instagram. In the show notes, you can also see Nora's and my personal Instagram accounts. So please like and subscribe there as well. So for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye, guys.